Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Psychiatric Exile. This week, we're going to be talking about the classic horror movie The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, specifically concentrating on Danny's character arc and its symbolism. The main thesis of the video is that the movie represents Danny's journey through the phallic stage of development. This is one of the Freudian's stages of development, and we'll discuss that in detail a little bit later. If we start at the beginning with the opening credits, I think this whole sequence foreshadows the characters' encounter with their own unconscious. All of them, all three of them, Wendy, Jack, and Danny. I think this whole sequence is contrasting the eternal, majestic presence and beauty of nature as a representation of the unconscious with the insignificance of man's efforts, in this case, the car, which is the result of consciousness, industry, man's conscious effort. And in all these takes, the car looks very insignificant in comparison to the surrounding nature. Another symbol that is presented in this opening sequence is that of the tunnel, which has both possible sexual associations as the car penetrates the tunnel, but can also imply that we're moving from one plane, the plane of the temporal and consciousness, to a different realm, the atemporal or the unconscious. Now, the hotel itself, I think, integrates both the conscious or temporal realm with the unconscious or atemporal realm. How does it do that? Um, It does that because the hotel as a structure, like the car, is the result of human industry and conscious effort. But at the same time, the foundations of the hotel extend their roots towards a Native American sacred burial ground, which is the atemporal land of the representative of the atemporal land of the unconscious. So the hotel also provides the conditions that favor the manifestation of the unconscious. It's isolated, and there's lack of sensorial stimulation, and the family, once there by themselves, is involved in a very repetitive routine. All things that tend to favor the spontaneous manifestation of unconscious contents. From here, we move to the conversation that the family had on their way to the hotel. Um, this is when Jack started talking about the donor incident. This was a group of people that resorted to cannibalism in order to survive. I think that this conversation, in combination with the inner conflict that Danny was already facing, is what primed him to both be confronted by the unconscious, but also to make eventually, at a certain point in the movie, a regression to the oral stage. Now, we know from the works of Melanie Klein that children in the oral stage have fantasies of cannibalism. So, this discussion steered these repressed fantasies in Danny, and eventually they got potentiated to the extent that he regressed to the oral stage. So I stated that the whole movie is representative of Danny's navigating the phallic stage. What does that mean? Well, Freud discussed different stages of psychosexual development, as we see in the table, starting with the oral stage from 0 to 1 year old. That's the stage where the cannibalistic fantasies are present, according to the work of Melanie Klein. Then an anal stage, phallic stage, latency, and genital, which is the last developmental state. It all, i- i- each stage is defined by where the libido or the area of pleasure or satisfaction is concentrated. The first stage is the mouth, and so forth for each subsequent stage. So Danny is 5 years old, and therefore he should be navigating the phallic stage. The central task of the phallic stage is to overcome the Oedipal complex. This comes from the story of Oedipus, which was a boy that was prophesied to eventually kill his father and marry his mother, his own mother. So when the father knew of this prophecy, he asked for Oedipus to be taken away and killed. The person in charge of that task uh, couldn't kill the baby Oedipus, but what he did was he pierced his ankles and he tethered them together so he could not crawl. That's why Oedipus, for the rest of his life, is walks with a limp. As we see in the picture here, he has a cane. This is important at a later moment in the film. Uh, Oedipus, I think, is made reference to symbolically in the limp of one of the characters. So, based on that Oedipus story, Freud proposed that at 5 years old, the boy wants to possess the mother and have her for himself. He doesn't want to share. Therefore, but he knows that the mother, he understands in his world that the mother belongs to the father. That's how he perceives it. Therefore, if he wants to possess the mother for himself, he would have to kill the father in order to achieve that. But as he further observes the world around him, he discovers accidentally or maybe by play, if he has a sister, that girls, including his mother, don't have a penis. He has a penis. His father has a penis. His mother has no penis. That makes him think that the mother is missing the penis because at some point the father cut it off. He castrated her. He then starts to fear the power of the father and that he may suffer, the child may suffer the same fate and be castrated if the father found out about the fantasies he has of killing him. That makes the boy repress the desire to possess the mother and kill the father, and that leads to the development of the superego and the eventual successful integration into society at large. So, navigating the Oedipal complex successfully is key for someone to eventually be able to integrate himself into society at large and accept the rules and the regulations and the limitations that implies. Before Danny gets to the hotel, we see him at home and we learn a few things about him. We know that he's introverted. He has few friends. In fact, he has so few friends. We don't see any in the film, and he gets to the point where he starts talking to an imaginary friend. So we know that he's prone to fantasy. We also know that he's being raised in a traditional family, quote unquote, in the sense that the mom stays at home, spends the most time with the boy. The father is detached both physically because of his work; he's mostly out of the home, but also emotionally, he's not very connected to Danny. This is the family structure of the patients Freud saw and the ones he developed his theory on. So it makes sense that Danny should face a similar pattern of psychosexual development, including the Oedipal stage. It is at home that Danny has the first vision of the twin girls. Now, a couple of things here. These are not the Grady girls. We know that because the vision, first of all, the vision happens before Danny gets to the hotel. Also, it is later stated that the Grady girls are not twins, but they are 10 and 8 years old, respectively. So these are not the Grady girls. These twins that appear in the vision, in the same vision, a little bit later, they appear murdered. They were caught with a sharp object. Um, so this vision is an intrusion in Danny's consciousness of his own Oedipal complex and the fear of its consequences: um, mutilation, castration, and death. Uh, Danny, at this point, is barely able to repress his Oedipal complex, and this complex is ready to burst into consciousness, as we see in this vision, burst into consciousness at any moment. Danny unconsciously fears that the hotel will favor the conditions of the complex becoming even more conscious, less repressed, and that will be problematic. Before we follow Danny's arc in the hotel, let's take a moment to talk about the character of Dick Halloran. Uh, Mr. Halloran is a fatherly figure, and he tries to help Danny understand what he's going through while normalizing the experience. So he talks to Danny about The Shining, and he tells him something along the lines of, "I know what you're going through. You're going through things that you don't understand and you find scary, but hey, this is normal. A lot of people go through this. I went through the same thing, and I am okay." So this is what a father does to try to normalize and explain to a kid that's facing maybe sensations, having feelings and desires, and stimulations that are new to him and he do not understand, to help him through that situation. In that sense, Mr. Halloran is kind of a fatherly figure. No, not only that, but he introduces a taboo, the "thou shalt not." He tells Danny to not go into room 237. This is a taboo that Mr. Halloran establishes in that frame while he is telling this to Danny. As we see here, in the frame, we see Danny below. He's not below physically. I mean, this column is a little farther back, but the frame creates the illusion that the knives are immediately above Danny, threatening to kill and cut. This is, as Mr. Halloran is establishing the taboo, this is the threat of punishment if breaking that taboo. So we know the taboo in the Oedipal complex is the sole possession of the mother and killing the father in order to achieve that. The punishment is castration. So structurally, this particular frame, this particular scene, is making a similar. Is constructing an analogy of that structure. The taboo now is not going into room 237 that takes the place of possessing the mother. And here's the punishment: is killing, castration, cutting. The goal here is helping Danny successfully navigate the Oedipal complex by accepting the repression of unacceptable desires. So Danny's goal here would be not to go into room 237. If he is able to do that, then by proxy, he would successfully navigate the Oedipal stage. The character of Mr. Halloran is also interesting in the sense that he is strongly associated with sexual desire, as seen both in his name, first name Dick, and also when he is in his room. He has two paintings, not one but two, one on top of his bed, another one on top of the TV, with sensual naked woman. So this unconsciously creates in the viewer the association of Mr. Halloran with the male sexual organ, as alluded in his name, and sexual desire, as alluded by these paintings. In fact, Mr. Grady eventually tells Jack, "Your son plans to bring an outside party into the situation," meaning the emergence of Danny's desire for his mother, as represented by Danny bringing Dick into the situation, Dick Halloran, which is the outside party that Grady is alluding to, is going to soon disrupt Jack's place as head of the family. Now, let's go over Danny's character arc once he's in the hotel. The first time that we see Danny by himself, he's playing darts, and there's a psychoanalytical association of playing darts with the sexual act. So this is all to reinforce the inner conflict that Danny is struggling with. In the playing of darts, there's the act of penetration, the act of repetition, so penetration of a sharp, elongated object into a round object. And it is while Danny is engaged in this symbolically sexual activity that he sees the twins for the first time. Uh, and there's a couple of interesting things here. First, why twins? Well, first of all, we often see the duplication of contents in the manifestations of the unconscious. So that's the first thing. Also, the twins have a long history of being figures of taboo throughout history because they were considered to be bringers of misfortune. In fact, in some cultures, they were either killed or separated or abandoned shortly after birth. In some other cultures, the twins are associated with birth and fertility. So it seems like throughout history, the figure of the twins has spontaneously produced unconscious associations of either taboo, misfortune, or birth and fertility with the sexual implications. So these twins, we know they are not the Grady girls that was already established. So what are they? They are, again, a manifestation of the taboo that is sexual in nature. So we see the taboo, the calamity bringers of misfortune, birth and fertility, the sexual aspect, and they are twins because in the unconscious contents are frequently duplicated, and they present to Danny in the hotel for the first time while he is playing darts with his sexual associations or symbolical implications. Now, the next time we see Danny, he tries to break the taboo. He actually tries to get into room 237 and violate the taboo established by Mr. Halloran, but the door is locked. And right then and there, he sees the twins again, uh, reestablishing the association between the girls and the taboo. So he tries to break into the room, he tries to violate the taboo, and boom, he sees the twin girls. The next time Danny sees the twins, after he had tried to go into the room, they say, "Come and play with us forever." This is an invitation to break the taboo. He then As a result, Danny sees the girls killed and cut up again. After the invitation to break the taboo, he sees the possible consequence of doing that, the threat of castration, killing, cutting for breaking that taboo. And in the next sequence, in the next scene that we see Danny, he is asking Jack, "Dad, you would not hurt me and Mom, right?" So he suspects, at some level, he understands unconsciously that the threat of cutting and killing comes from the father. And finally, we get to the point where Danny violates the taboo. Here he's seen playing on top of a carpet that has a sexual symbolism. As we see here, we see a phallic like structure penetrating again a round structure here. See the phallic structure and the round structure. Similar to when he was playing darts, the same symbolism, the elongated phallic sharp object penetrating the round object, which uh, we see a similar pattern in the carpet, on the carpet of the room 237, indicating that the taboo associated with room 237 is sexual in nature, and Danny is about to violate it. Danny is startled by a ball that rolled towards him. He stands up, and as he stands up, we start to see progressively more clearly a rocket in his shirt. So eventually he's fully standing and the rocket is fully visible. So there's an association here between Danny and the rocket, which is another phallic symbol. As soon as the phallic symbol appears, next word that comes out of his mouth is asking, "Mom? Like, Mom, is that you? Mom, are you there?" And room 237 is now open. Danny goes into the room. He breaks the taboo that was established by Mr. Halloran. And as he breaks that taboo, that scene fades away, and we see Wendy. So we see the associations here: penetration, phallus, penetration, the sexual nature of the taboo associated with room 237, and then the room fades away as we see Wendy establishing the equivalency between the taboo of room 237 and the mother figure. Next thing we see is Jack waking up from a nightmare where he killed Wendy and Danny. And he says, I cut you into little pieces. Again, this happened immediately as Danny was going into room 237. This is the punishment for violating the taboo. It is Jack's task to punish Danny by cutting him into little pieces for violating the taboo. Remember, this is all symbolic in nature. This is the language of the unconscious. It's not that, this is supposed to happen literally. Um, and Danny then enters the room where his parents are, but he now looks very different. Danny now is looking disoriented. He's sucking his thumb, which is not something we've seen until this point. And he has marks on his neck. Um, it's physically impossible to have been Jack who made these marks, because Jack was downstairs sleeping while uh, Danny was going into room 237. So I think what we're seeing here is Danny's regression to the oral stage. Why? Well, he violates the taboo. By violating the taboo, of the Oedipal stage, he cannot move forward with his development. He's stuck. He can either stay there, or he can go back and regress to an earlier stage. We see that Danny feels very, I think we can see it's implied that Danny feels very guilty about violating this taboo. That's why he's not talking. He probably made these marks on his neck to himself as a way of self-punishment. He cannot handle the fact that he betrayed Mr. Halloran's decree, and he did the forbidden. So he doesn't want to stay in the Oedipal stage. His only way is to move back to the previous stage, the oral stage. That's why he's sucking his thumb, not talking, behaving like a baby. They have to do everything for him, dependent. Um, and in the oral stage, going back to the work of Melanie Klein, the main defense mechanism is splitting. What is splitting? Splitting is dividing the same object into a good object and a bad object. And because the kid is unable to understand that the same object can be good and bad, he's unable to integrate the positive and negative aspects of an object into a whole. So he splits the object into two. And he does that by splitting the mother figure into the good mother, which is Wendy, and the bad mother, which is the crazy old lady that he says tried to strangle him in room 237. And we get to the whole sequence of Red Room. Here, Danny is alone with his mom in the bedroom, and he grabs a knife or a tool of castration and the mother's lipstick, which is, again, a stand in for the mom and has some sexual symbolism. And he uses that lipstick to write Red Room, which is murder backwards. So he's writing murder, but in a repressed way, not in an explicit way. And the both the symbolism and the fact that murder is coming out in a repressed way, not explicitly, uh, it's telling us that these are manifestations of the unconscious. So we have a situation that reestablishes the Oedipal structure, the desire for the mother, represented by the lipstick, leading to the fear of castration, represented by the knife, of which the only way out is killing the father or murder, Red Room. All these components are represented in this scene. And again, Red Room, the real meaning is revealed only when looking at it with a mirror. Now, this reestablishes the Oedipal complex, and the act of reestablishing the Oedipal complex in this action is what helps Danny to finally get out of the oral stage, overcome that regression, and come back to the phallic stage to try this time to navigate the whole Oedipal complex successfully. Which brings us to the resolution of the movie. The Oedipal structure is now materialized. Danny is alone with his mother behind closed doors in a bedroom, so he has sole possession of the mother. While Jack is trying to get to them with an axe, a castrating object to cut and mutilate and kill. And as he limps after his fall, when he tried to injure Wendy. So here we see Jack when he's limping. Again, this is to bring an unconscious association with Oedipus, who also had a limp. And we see the castrating weapon here. Uh, he's going to punish Danny for having sole possession of the mother. Danny escapes and he hides. And as this happens, Jack kills Mr. Halloran. This is the final castrating injury. Remember, Mr. Halloran's first name is Dick, and he comes here to help Danny, to rescue Danny. He's Danny's friend. So symbolically, he's Danny's Dick, and he needs to be caught by Jack. Uh, this castrating loss for Danny, which, by the way, while this is taking place, we see his face superimposed in the sequence to make the association that it is him that's being castrated. Mr. Dick is being physically killed, but it's Danny who's being castrated. So this castrating loss, castrating injury allows him to finally successfully navigate the Oedipal complex and move on from the oral stage. Uh, because Kubrick turned this story into an Oedipal drama. This is why Mr. Halloran needed to be killed, in contrast to the book, where he doesn't die. Here he had to be killed because Danny had to suffer this castrating injury in order to move on with his development. So, having gone through that castrating injury, that loss, Danny is now ready to gather his internal resources, solve the maze, which, by the way, has a long history as a symbol of initiation. And it was Wendy who introduced Danny to the maze and who showed him how to navigate it. But he solves the maze. By doing that, he's able to overcome the father, and he moves on with his development, escaping, incidentally, escaping with the mother by using the means that Dick provided, was the car with which Dick got there, that they were able to exit the situation. So that's my interpretation of the Shining, specifically Danny's character arc. Next, I think it's a purely Freudian Oedipal structure or story. Next, I will be talking about Jack's character arc in the same movie, which is completely different. I think it's Jungian in nature. These are like two movies in one. I think what Kubrick did here was nothing short of genius. And but we'll be talking about Jack next week. As usual, thank you for your time, and see you next time.